Howdy, everybody. I was hiking with my wife last summer. I live in Utah, and everyone who would walk by, I'd say howdy to them. And after the 10th time, she's like, "You're not from Texas. You're not allowed to say that. It's kind of weird." So I guess I'm a self-described adoptee as well. Did any of you see in the news, this was a couple weeks ago, there's a group that concluded an 18-month review of going around the country, trying to understand how education is going in America. They looked at curricula, they opened textbooks, they looked at assessments and scores, they held cottage meetings with teachers and principals. Their charter was to try and understand how we are doing in America when it comes to the education of our children. I don't know if you guys saw the headlines on this, but the report that came out, they called it "A Nation at Risk." And in that report, they said, among other things, that the educational foundations of America are being overwhelmed by a rising tide of mediocrity. And that if a foreign government, they said, had attempted to impose upon America the very mediocre educational performance that now exists today, we might have viewed it, they said, as an act of war. As it stands, we've allowed it to happen to ourselves. Anyone see this in the news? None of you did. Why? Because I lied to you. This report didn't come out a few weeks ago. It was April 26, 1983. Raise of hands, anyone here in the room believe that in the past 4 decades, education in America has substantially improved or not? Anyone? Make sure I see. No? Okay, no hands raised. Now, I won't lie to you with this statistic. This one did recently come out. This was about a year ago now. The National Assessment for Educational Performance in Utah, they're called, in America, they're called the NAEP scores. Every year they test 4th graders, 8th graders, 12th graders, and this is the official assessment in all of the government schools trying to understand how are we doing. And the score that recently came out for 8th graders in America, when it comes to their proficiency in American history, anyone see this? This one actually did make waves in the news. Okay, 8th graders, what percentage do you think are proficient across the whole country when it comes to their knowledge of American history? 13%. That is not 30, that is 1-3, 13%. So then I ask you, what becomes of our country when this 13% contingent, or rather the 87% on the other side, become voters and have the same voting power that you and I do, and they become the elected officials? What happens to our nation, right? You've all heard that quote before. Those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. We all know this quote. Some of you know about Tuttle twins. Dr. Phil sold 70 million books. He's got several decades on me, okay? By the time I'm that old, I'm going to have sold 700 million Tuttle twins books. So I don't know what this 70 million nonsense is. We sold 5 million books now. We're in 12 languages. We do a whole lot. We got toddler books, which a lot of you got back there. We're all the way through teens. We got a cartoon. But a couple years ago, we came out with an American history book. And the reason why is because of that quote. Those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. We did a little research project. We gathered a bunch of the social studies textbooks that are used from about 4th through 10th grade, trying to understand, in America, how are we teaching our kids about the Revolution, about the Constitution and the Declaration, the founding ideals of our country. And so the very short version of this research project is that all of these books did a fantastic job at teaching kids what I call the superficial history, right? It's like if you ever want to win Jeopardy and know the answer to the most random questions about who said what on which date, at which place this thing happened, right? These books are chock full of that information. They're great on the superficial history. But all of these textbooks did horribly when it comes to what I call the substantive side of history. The ideas, the philosophies, the values, the why behind it all, right? And so kids, millions of kids like me, I'm a graduate of the public school system, and In California, no less. My mom apologizes for not homeschooling me because in the 80s it was the homeschoolers that were the weirdos, and now today it's all the public schoolers that are the weirdos. So the world has changed quite a bit. My mom still apologizes, but I didn't like history when I went to school, right? Because it was all the factoids, and I didn't understand why I should care about what happened in the 1600s or in the 1700s. And so we've now put out 2 of our own history books trying to help kids understand the why, right? Because if we want kids to learn content, they need to have context. Context precedes content. When we just drill kids' minds full of factoids without context, without them understanding why it matters to them, why it matters today, it's just going to go in one ear and out the other. It's pump and dump, right? And so we've been at it for a while with the Tuttle twins, and like Patriot Mobile and like Dr. Phil, we know we're in amongst friends and a good crowd because this was like a year or so ago. CNN came after the Tuttle twins, and there was this big headline in the article that said they're creating a right-wing children's education complex. And thank you. Yeah, yes, we are. That's exactly what we're doing. Now, some of you, if your baby, this is our 10th year of doing Tuttle twins, and Rick is right. When we started doing the Tuttle twins, you guys, people on the right, our conservative and libertarian friends, thought we were crazy. I would literally go to conferences and booths. I would be in the corner. No one knew who we were or who I was. It was this new thing. And people would kind of look at it with a side glance. Oh, let kids be kids, right? I'll talk to my kids about that stuff when they're an adult. Why do we, need to talk to them about political things and economic things right now? And so it was hard even to convince people who are like-minded to talk to their kids about these ideas. We don't have to do that anymore. Everyone knows that our children's minds are ground zero for a psychological and spiritual war, and that parents need armor, they need weaponry, they need to be able to help their children. And when we started doing the Tuttle twins, so CNN, I didn't finish the story. So CNN, they write this article saying that we're creating a right-wing children's education complex. Now, some of you, if your baby was attacked, you would feel pretty bad, right? Like you might go cry or eat a pint of ice cream or listen to Julie's playlist to get your spirits back up, right? Well, I wasn't any of those emotions. I was totally fine. In fact, I was smiling when I read the CNN article. I started laughing a little bit. Why would I smile and laugh if CNN is attacked? Well, it's what Patriot Mobile said, right? That business goes up every time they get attacked. In fact, we did one better. Not only did we sell a bunch of books because of CNN, but I screenshotted the article. I sent it across social media. At the time, we had an email list of about 600,000 or 700,000. I plastered our email list, and I said, you guys, this weekend only, get 50% off the Tuttle Twins books using coupon code CNN. Thank you. That weekend, we sold over 100,000 books in a single weekend. So that was good times. And if anyone has any contacts at MSNBC that wants to send them my way, I'd very much welcome that. Some of you probably saw last fall the kid who got kicked out of school in Colorado Springs. Do you remember this in the fall? The backpack patriot, Jaden. He was this is what's crazy, you guys. You think, okay, the public schools, well, I homeschool my kid, or I got him in a charter school, or we're in Texas, right? It's a red state, and things are fine with my school board. Jaden was attending, this 12-year-old boy, he was attending a classical charter school that had a charter and a founding specifically to teach civic virtue. The whole purpose of this school that he was attending was to raise little patriots. And yet in his class, on his backpack, he had the Gadsden flag, the yellow "Don't Tread on Me." And the teacher in that class said that flag had origins in slavery and that it was a disruption to the classroom environment. They kicked him out. Mom, to her credit, secretly recorded the meeting with the vice principal, where the vice principal is conveying these arguments, saying that it has origins in slavery, which is, again, totally backwards. You would hope that we send our children to these academic institutions to learn truth and not to push falsehoods on them. So Jaden stood his ground. He said, I am not taking the patch off. So we got kicked out. Mom's driving him home. They're in the car. And Jaden says, Mom, in one of those... In one of those Tuttle Twins books, when the twins run into legal problems, they get the media to come help them apply pressure to the local city councilman. Do you think we could get the media involved? And again, mom, to her credit, you see where I'm going with this. This is mom really knowing her stuff and standing up for her child. Mom literally detours, stops driving home, and drives over to the local NBC TV station affiliate. Jaden goes up to the front doorbell, the little security camera thing on the building, the office building, and he rings the doorbell, and the receptionist is like, yeah, can I help you? Hey, I'm Jaden. I got kicked out. I have this story to share. Will someone... No one would come out to talk to him. And so he goes home, and they're like, what do we do? And that night, Jaden's like, well, can we reach out to Mr. Boyack? They DM me the video of the mom with the vice principal. I'm at a jazz club in Chicago with some friends. I get this video, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is gold. I immediately knew this had viral potential. I said, yeah, I can share it if you want. Are you okay with that? Like, this could bring a lot of heat and a lot of attention. Eyes wide open, she said, yeah, let's do it. It's what Jaden wants to do. He's been reading your book. He had read Tuttle Twins for 4 years. He knew American history. He knew free speech. He wanted to stand up for his rights. Guys, I want to make 1 million more Jadens. That's what we need, right? And so the next morning, I post the video, and, libs of TikTok and, Ben Shapiro and everyone start retweeting it. It got over 50 million views. And Jaden, that night, in fact, was the parent, it was what do they call it? The back to school night, right? Because it was in the fall. They had this big kind of, event planned and everything. 3 hours before, they sent out an urgent email to all of the families at the school saying, it's been canceled. They had an emergency board meeting that night to overturn what the administration had done and let Jaden go back to school. And now he wants to homeschool. He's begging his mom to homeschool him. Go, Jaden. Now, you've probably heard this quote, those of you who work in the political arena especially. We say this over and over again, that politics is downstream of culture. You ever heard of that? This is why the culture wars are unfortunately necessary, because politics are downstream of culture. They're inherently affected by it. I believe that quote is true, but I also believe it's incomplete. Yes, politics is downstream of culture, but culture is downstream of the family. And so many of us, we're pro-family and we support families and we love our families. But as a conservative, libertarian, right-of-center movement, we do a horrible job at this. We talk to adults. We engage voters. We wait until kids, and then we have college outreach programs, and then we do voter outreach programs. Horace Mann, who was the creator of the modern American school, he was the first commissioner of education in Massachusetts. He went over to Prussia, saw this very militaristic model, this authoritarian model of education. He loved it. He brought it back, and that is the government school system we had ever since. Horace Mann, horrible guy in a lot of ways. He's got a bunch of doozy quotes, one of which is, men are like cast iron, children are like wax. You understand what he means by that? It's very hard to change the minds of an adult. It's very hard to get people to think differently. But children are like wax. This is why dictators in centuries past have always gone after the children. But I would submit to you that it's why we also need to go after the children. Because if we do not compete for the hearts and minds of the rising generation, then we are fighting a losing battle. I'm sick of playing defense, you guys. Don't you want to go on the offense? Don't you want to win? Right? Not have one step forward and then 18 steps back, right? We want to win, but that requires us to reach out to families, to attract and serve and support families, and that's so critical in our grassroots engagement especially. I want to conclude with a story from Hungary. Not Hungary. None of you are hungry anymore. The country Hungary. This is the Hungarian Revolution. The Soviets are in control. They're occupying the country. You got Buddha and Pest, and you got all of these tanks and soldiers. And this group of teenagers decides that they're going to be a little bit rebellious. This was their Lexington shot heard around the world. They grabbed some Molotov cocktails, and they started throwing it at the tanks. And the soldiers were unprepared for this. They were newer, they were younger, they didn't really know the rules of engagement, they were caught off guard. And the Molotov cocktails spread like wildfire, both literally and figuratively. Many other young people, especially young people, started picking up and creating Molotov cocktails, throwing them at tanks, destroying these tanks. They started shooting at the soldiers. War broke out, and they repelled the Soviets. They threw off the shackles of their Soviet oppression. Well, the tanks were kind of the smaller, older ones, and those soldiers were younger and newer. So they all got out of Dodge, and suddenly the Hungarians found freedom. And they didn't know what to do with themselves. They took control of the single radio station. They started broadcasting messages of peace and independence. They quickly formed a government trying to figure out how they could self-govern, right? The Soviets had destroyed the church in the center square to put up a statue of whoever it was, their great leader. They toppled the statue. They're excited. They have independence. Well, the empire struck back. The Soviets came back with bigger tanks, more experienced soldiers, and a whole lot more of both. And they crushed the rebellion. Okay? The Hungarian Revolution was very short-lived. And when that spark was extinguished, a lot of families just said, I can't do this anymore. I've been trying to fight for my country, but things are too bad. And so they left across the bridge at Andau into Austria. And in Austria, there were a lot of reporters interviewing the families coming across the border. Share your stories with us. Tell us what it's like to live, right, under Soviet control. And one family crossed the border, the Hadjock family. They had 2 kids, a girl and a boy. 13-year-old Vera was the girl. And the interviewers were asking the parents various questions, and Vera chimes in and she says, I didn't believe any of the propaganda we were being taught. My teacher was trying to force lies down. I would just nod my head and play along, but I knew it was all lies. It was disgusting. I'm so glad to be out of there. And the interviewers were like, oh, okay, yeah, keep going. This is really good stuff. But they turned to Mrs. Hadjock and they said, why is it that your 13-year-old daughter has spunk? Why is it that she knew about this propaganda? All the other kids that we talk to are sullen, shadowy versions of themselves. They can't look us in the eyes. They can't hold on a conversation. They're just hollow. How is it that your 13-year-old daughter is like this? To which Mrs. Hadjock replied, every night when the lights would go out, we would go down into the cellar as a family, we would open our Bible, and we would wash our children's minds of the filth that had been put in them that day. And I submit to you that it's going to take that same level of intentionality. No longer assuming the best of people, no longer going with the flow, no longer saying, I went to public school and I turned out fine, things can't be that bad today. No longer saying, oh, all that libs of TikTok stuff, that's just in like New York and California. That's not happening in Texas, right? Things are great here. No longer being apathetic, no longer being disengaged, being intentional with daily acts of involvement with our children. Because ultimately, I believe that we're not going to save our country at the Capitol. It's important to engage at the Capitol, right? We need to fight, we need to defend our freedoms, but I don't think that's where we save our country. I also don't think we save our country at the courtroom, even though it's important to litigate and fight the government and challenge overreach in the judicial branch. But I don't think we save our country at the Capitol or in the courtroom. If we're going to save our country, I think it's at the family dinner table. Rebuilding social fabric and helping our kids learn. Now, here's my pleading pitch to you. Donate, right? Become a monthly subscriber, but go beyond that. Don't just donate, as was said before, your money, but also donate your time and involve your kids. Bring them with you at 4 a.m. in the morning to the Capitol. Take them on the adventure. Model for your children what civic engagement looks like. Be the change you wish to see in the world, right? I am a product of this. My mom was on our city council for 10 years, and in her email signature for like 30 years has been the quote from Gandhi, be the change you wish to see in the world. And apples don't fall far from their trees, right? And so that is what you can do for your children as well. That is how we reclaim our country. That is the message of hope, because we can turn this around. But like the Hadjocks, it requires us to have those daily acts of intentionality. So let's do it. Thank you.